Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Pesachim Daf Pesachim is the first Daf in the 8th Perek of the Masechta, Perek HaIsha, and it discusses the halacha about what happens when one person is signed up to two Korban Pesach. Generally, in order to sign up, you have to do a kinyan, and therefore you can only belong to one. You'll know which one you belong to. However, sometimes somebody can do it for you, and in that situation, you may have you may find yourself signed up to more than one carbon. Which one is the correct one? And the Gemara will say it's the one that we assume you meant to, the one that you wanted to be a part of, and the other one you're not a part of. And sometimes we have to figure out which one did you want. So we have a few cases at the Mishnah list. The first one is where a woman was signed up to a carbon by her husband and by her father. So which one does she go with? So the Gemara says that the general understanding is that she goes with her husband's carbon. However, if it's the first Yom Tov after the wedding, then it's very likely she wants to go to her father, because younger couples generally go to their parents, to her parents, for the first Yom Tov, and then it depends whichever one she wants. So Gemara says next case is where you have an orphan who has two legal guardians, and they both signed him up to their own carbon. Again, it's up to the orphan to choose which one he wants. Now we have the problem of a slave, an eved. So if he has two masters, he has a real problem, because he can't go to either of them, because the half that belongs to somebody else can't eat by this half. So he can't eat from either one. The Gemara will explain how they can resolve the issue. Somebody who is half free and half his owners has the problem that he can't eat from his owner's carbon, because his free half doesn't have a right to join there as well. Okay, now the Gemara begins. The Gemara has a brief discussion about the Mishnah, and then it's going to launch into a lengthy Agarata discussing women in their father or father-in-law's house, and then it speaks at length about the prophecies of Hosea. The Navi Hosea translates and explains a number of his conversations with Hashem, the prophecies that happened there, and then it discusses the Golus of Klal Yisrael and why there's Chesed involved in it, and a number of other subjects. Okay, so first of all, the Gemara says it seems from a Mishnah that we hold of Breira. Breira means that you can find out later what you were really thinking before. Why do we say that? Because when you sign up to a carbon, you have to be signed up to it at the time of Shechita. But we said we're going to ask the woman later which one she wants to be a part of. Well, how's that going to help for what she was a part of earlier? So obviously we say Breira, if she wants this later, that's the one that she wanted earlier. So it says not necessarily. You could be that we're asking her at the time of Shechita, we're asking her then which one do you want to be a part of. Okay. Next thing says we have a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Brisa. Our Mishnah says that generally she's assumed with her husband, and for Yom Tov she's assumed to go either way. But this Brisa says very differently. It says generally it can go either way, and for Yom Tov it's definitely with her father. So it's one level shifted towards her father. So the Gemara says this is talking about a woman who was very much running towards her father's house all the time, and therefore we can assume that first Yom Tov she for sure wants to go to her father, and even if it's not first Yom Tov, we're not sure about where she really wants to go. The Gemara now brings a pasuk on the subject of a woman running to her father's house. It's from Shir Hashirim, where it's a mashal to Klal Yisrael telling Hashem how well that they are found. And the woman says as follows: she runs home and she tells her husband, "I was found in his eyes perfect." She's going home to tell her father how well she's doing and how wonderfully she's accepted in her father-in-law's house. Now this doesn't match too well with our version, with our subject, where we were referring to a woman who's running home because she's not happy in her father-in-law's house. But either way, it's referring to a woman who's running home, and therefore it's brought here. Now we have three other psukim which discuss Klal Yisrael with the mashal of a married woman. So the first one is where Hashem says, Klal Yisrael, there will come the day where Tikri'i Ishi voice Tikri'i li oy baili. You'll call me my Ishi, my husband, you won't call me my baili, which is also means husband, but it's more of a expression of mastery and less of an expression of closeness and intimacy. Okay, next pasuk is Chosana Ketana V'Shadayim Ein La. We say in Shir Hashirim we have a little sister and she has no breasts. The Shadayim are generally used to refer to something which is nurturing. So what is this who has no Shadayim? So Rav Yochanan says it's the place called Elam, which did not have any Talmidei Chachamim that were able to teach Torah to others. The Talmidei Chachamim that they had were Daniel and Mordechai, but because the people there were not on a high level, they weren't able to learn. So they were not able to nurture, so they did not have the nurturing Shadayim. On a similar pasuk, we say Klal Yisrael says, Ani chayma v'shadei kamigdalos, I am a wall and my breasts are like towers, again referring to the nurturing aspect. So what is this referring to? So Rav Yechon says, I am a wall is referring to the Torah, which protects, and shadei kamigdalos is the Talmidei Chachamim who nurture. And the third one, and there's another explanation of that is Ani Chayma Am a wall is referring to Klal Yisrael. Shadei Kamigdalos is the shuls and the Batei Medrash, which give protection. The towers, Migdalos means towers, they give protection for the people. Okay, more discussion about a Kala, newly married bride. Says the Gemara of Zutra Bar Tevi said in the Merav, what is the meaning of the pasuk Asher Banenu Kinetiyim? Our sons are like fresh saplings Megadolim that are just growing Benareim in their youth. Benisenu Kizevis Mechutavis Tavnas Heichal. And our daughters are like corners, and it's all in the form of the Beis Hamikdash. So what does this mean? So he explains our sons are like young trees, that is that they have no chatam, they have no sins, they're young and fresh, nothing's broken in them. Our daughters are like corners, that means to say that they close their openings and keep it only for their husbands, even though they are full. Corners means full of desire, but they keep themselves proper. So Gemara says, how do you know that the word corners has anything to do with being full? So Gemara brings us a few psukim to prove that. It says, Umo kamizra kizaver is filled like the corners of the mizbeach. So you see that there's a relationship between corners and full. Or mizaveinu malei mefikim mizan alzan, the corners are full, giving grain from one harvest to another. Also pasuk in Tehillim, and it's showing again that corners means full. Now, the end of our original pasuk, it said that they are shaped like the Beis Hamikdash. That as long as they have these zechusim, they are as if the Beis Hamikdash was built in their days. Okay, now we're going to launch into a discussion of the Navi Hosea, and the reason is because Hosea's wife was a mashal to Klal Yisrael, and there was a lengthy arrangement that happened with him, which was all a nevuah that discussed Klal Yisrael. So first of all, the Gemara discusses a little bit about Hosea. The Gemara says that Hosea was a Navi in the days of the kings of Uzziah, Yosem, Achaz, and Chizkiah, 4 kings of Yehuda. The Gemara brings a pasuk that shows that. The Gemara says that there were actually 4 Nevi'im that said nevuah during those 4 kings. Those 4 Nevi'im are Hosea, Yeshaya, Amos, and Micha. Hosea was the greatest of them all because it says, Tchilas Diber Hashem Hosea. Hashem spoke to Hosea first. Now, obviously, didn't speak to him first. There were many Nevi'im before him, but it means to say that he was the greatest of those 4. Now, what did Hashem say to Hosea? So this is not written explicitly in the Pesukim, what we're about to see, but the Gemara will show where it's derived. The first words that Hashem says to him that we see is go take for yourself a woman who's a zona, who's a prostitute, and children of prostitutes, meaning she will bear prostituting children to you. Now, what was this all about? So the Gemara says that Hashem said to Hosea, your children have done averos, they've sinned. So Hosea should have said, first of all, they're not my children, they're your children. Second of all, they're the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you should have rachmanos on them. But Hosea didn't defend them. Instead, he said, look, if they did averos, so then switch them for somebody else. So Hashem says, what am I going to do with this old man? I have to teach him a lesson. So what am I going to do? I'm going to tell him to marry a prostitute and have children which he doesn't even know are his, and then I'm going to tell him to divorce them, and he'll see that it's difficult to send them away, and then I'll teach him a lesson. So he said, go marry an immoral woman, and he went and he married Goimer, the daughter of Divlaim. So Gemara explains her name. Goimer, the Gemara says, from the word finishing, everybody used to finish their desires with her. She was a prostitute. Divlaim shows 2 bad things. She was bad and her mother was bad. Another explanation of Divlaim is that she was like Devela, like a pressed fig, which is very sweet, so everybody got sweetness out of her, or everybody stepped on her like a pressed fig. Another explanation of the name Goimer is that in her days, the Goyim wanted to finish off the wealth of Klal Yisrael, and the Gemara says, in fact, they did finish off the wealth of Klal Yisrael when King Chatzael and his son Ben Hadad destroyed the kingdom of Yehoachaz. It's recorded in the Navi, and the Gemara here brings a pasuk, Ibda Melech Aram v'yisimim ka'afar ladush. Aram destroyed them and made them like dirt to be trampled on. Anyway, going back to the story of Hosea, so the Gemara says that she gave birth to a son. The son was named Yisrael. Hashem said, call him Yisrael, and this is to show that Hashem is planning to take revenge on the house of Melech Yehu. Yehu was sent by Hashem to kill the house of Achaz. However, Yehu himself became an Avodah Zarah, and therefore Hashem said, I'm going to take revenge on you. Why did you have a business killing Achaz if you're going to be Avodah Zarah yourself? Now I sent you because you were a tzaddik, but once you lose that, you no longer have the right. So therefore you're going to be 4 generations, and then I'm going to take revenge on you, and you and all your descendants will be wiped out. That's symbolized by the name Yisrael. It was in the valley of Yisrael that all happened. Next, she gave birth to another child, and she was called Lo Ruchama, which Hashem was saying, I'm not going to have Rachmanas, I'm not going to have pity on Klal Yisrael. And then she had a son, and he was called Lo Ami. That Hashem is saying, they're not my people anymore. Not to say they're not my people altogether, but that my connection to them is hidden, and I'm going to behave as if not my people. So, after having 3 children, Hashem said to Hosea, now go and divorce her. What business do you have being married? Moshe Rabbeinu had to get divorced as soon as he got Nevuah. You should also. Now, there's a lot of questions on how that comparison works, but that's what he said. So Hosea said, I can't. What do you mean? She's my wife. She's the mother of my children. So how could I do this? How could I send her away? So Hashem said, you can't send her away, and she's immoral, and she's a sinner, and she's not even loyal to you, and your children, you don't even know if they're really yours, and you can't send them away. So how could I send away Klal Yisrael that are one of my 4 kinyanim, one of my 4 acquisitions in the world? The Gemara explains what Hashem's 4 acquisitions are, and the psukim that show each one. Torah is one, like it says, Hashem Kanani Reishis. Hashem acquired the Torah, which is the beginning of His way. Torah is called Reishis. Next it says is the sky and the earth, Shemayim v'aretz kinyan echa, like it says, Koine Shemayim v'aretz. Hashem is the Koine, the acquirer of heaven and earth. The third is Beis HaMikdash, like it says, Har Zeh Kanza Yamina, his right hand acquired this mountain. And the fourth is Klal Yisrael, as we're saying here, like it says, Am Zu Kanisa, and in Yasher we say, this people which you have acquired. Okay, so the Gemara says, going further in the story, Hosea saw that he did wrong, so he started being misbiled to daven to ask for Rachmanis for himself, for his Averos. So Hashem said, don't ask for Rachmanis for yourself, ask for Rachmanis for Klal Yisrael, because of you, I have 3 Gzeras against them. One is the Gzera of Yisrael, one is the Gzera of Lo Ruchama, and one is the Gzera of Lo Ami. So the Gemara says, so he did do that, he was misbaled for Klal Yisrael, he prayed for them, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu took off the 3 decrees, and the 3 psukim that show that. And Hashem gave them brachos instead. The first one is there will be many like the sand of the sea. That takes off the decree of Israel. And the next one is instead of saying Lo Ami, you will be called the children of the living God. That takes off the klal of Lo Ami. And Lo Ruchama, I will pity the one who was called Lo Ruchama, who didn't have mercy. That takes off the decree of Lo Ruchama. Okay. Now we had said before that there were 4 kings that were all survived by 4 Nevi'im. The Gemara says it's not good to be an authority. Authority kills people, like these 4 kings that were survived by 4 Nevi'im. Says the Gemara, another thing about these kings. The Gemara says, why is it that Yeravam ben Yehoash was a king of Yisrael, was listed together with Malchi Yehuda? How do we see that? Because the pasuk says, El Hoshea ben Be'eri, where Hashem's word came to Hoshea, B'mei Uzziah, Yosem Achaz Yechizkiah Malchi Yehuda, in the name of Uzziah, Yosem Achaz Chizkiah, kings of Yehuda, and Yimei Yeravam ben Yehoash Melech Yisrael. So it listed a king of Yisrael together with the Malchi Yehuda. That's a very big kavod. How did he get that kavod? Because he refused to accept Lashon Hara that was told by Amatzia, who was a Kohen, about Amos the Navi, because the Matzi came and he said that Yeravam, Amos is saying that you're going to be killed because you're the 3rd descendant of Yehu, and Yehu's entire house is going to be killed. So Yeravam said it can't be, because first of all I'm the 3rd descendant, and it's supposed to be 4th descendant is the one who's supposed to be killed. So I don't believe it. But even if he said it, what should he do? Hashem told him to say it. He should say it. There's nothing I can do about it. It's not a problem. Okay. The Gemara goes further and discusses the another limud based on the pasuk which we saw before. The Gemara says even in the Kadosh Baruch Hu's anger, he still has rachmanos, like it says, Ki lo Yosef oida rachem es beis Yisrael. I will no longer have mercy on Klal Yisrael, but the last words are Arachem is Beis Yisrael. I'll have mercy on Klal Yisrael. So within the curse, there's a blessing. Rav Chanina said it's actually the words after this that says Ki nasai es alehem. It's meant to be read. The simple pshat is that that's read as a rhetorical. Will I actually forgive them? But he could read it as a blessing that I'm actually going to forgive them. Okay. Going further, the Gemara says that there's more examples of mercy in the middle of anger. The Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent Klal Yisrael around to the nations of the world. He scattered us around all over the globe in our exile. For what purpose? In order to pick up converts, so that we should collect the Gerim from around the world. Because the psukim that describe us being scattered says, Uzratia li ba'aretz, I will spread them around, I will scatter them like seeds. And whenever you scatter seeds, you're intending it to grow much more. You plant a saw of seeds, you're intending to get back many core of growth. So that's what we're supposed to do. Hashem sent us around the Goyim, but we are planning on getting many more people out of that to join us. It says, and that's learned from V'richamti es l'ruchama, and I will have mercy on those who are not mercied, meaning those people who are not part of Klal Yisrael will come and join Klal Yisrael. Okay, going back to Hosea, it says, what is the meaning of the pasuk? Al talshin eved al dainav peni kalelcha v'ashamta. Do not slander a slave to his master, because he might curse you and you'll be guilty. What does that mean? That is connected to the next pasuk that says, Dar aviv yikal ves imay lo yivarech. A generation curses its father and doesn't bless its mother. So what does slandering a slave have to do with a generation of cursing its father and blessing its mother? What it means to say is as follows: even if you're in a generation that curses its father and blesses his mother, like Hosea was in, where Klal Yisrael were doing Averos, still you should not slander a master to his slave. Don't say bad things about Klal Yisrael to Hashem. Okay, now the Gemara expands on the discussion of the gullus, the exile that Klal Yisrael finds itself in, and how that there are many positive aspects of that. So the Gemara brings the pasuk Tzidkais Pirzainoi B'Yisrael, which simple pshat means that they will say over the righteous deeds of Klal Yisrael in the Pirzono, in the open cities. The Gemara says the drasha Pirzono can be read as Pizroinoi, which means to say that he scattered us amongst the nations, and that was a good thing. He scattered us for a very good reason, so that Klal Yisrael will not be destroyed. Because we're in many different countries, we cannot be destroyed all at once. Because if we're in trouble in a country, we'll be okay in a different country. So Gemara says there was a conversation between an Apikares and Rabbi Chanina. Apikares said, we are better than you, because when Klal Yisrael was in war against Edom, it says, you stayed there for 6 months and destroyed all the men of Edom. However, he said, you've been living amongst us, the Goyim, the Apikaresim, for many years, and we don't do anything to you. So Rabbi Chanina says, I'm going to send one of my students to deal with you, and he sent Avoshia, and he said, you would be very happy to destroy us. The only problem is that you don't know how. You have a problem. If you try to, you can't destroy all of us, because we're not all in one country, we're not all under your control. And if you decide to destroy just the ones that are under your control, they'll be Jews surviving somewhere else, and they will raise a ruckus, an international outcry against you, and therefore you won't be able to. So he said, you're right, actually, this is he swore by the name of one of the gods of the Romans. He said, this is our big struggle that we're thinking about all day. How are we going to get rid of you guys with this problem that you mentioned just now? Okay, more. The Gemara discusses the exile and some positive things that happened within it. The Gemara brings a brisa of Rav Chia. What's meant by the pasuk that says, Elokim haven darkav hu yadas mekayim? Hashem understood her way and knew her place. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that we could not survive if we were left in Edom in the Galus, and therefore He put us in Bavel instead. What is it that we could not survive? So the simple way of understanding is that the oppression of the Romans would be much worse than the Babylonians, and therefore Hashem sent us to Bavel instead. The Gemara now gives a number of other explanations of why the Galus was specifically sent to Bavel rather than to Edom. So the Gemara says, because Bavel is as deep as Sheol. It's as deep as Sheol, which sometimes means the grave and sometimes means a very low-lying land. the place where Klal Yisrael were was in the bottom of a deep valley. Now, why is that important? Because the pasuk says, "Me'ad Sha'ol efdei mimavis," I will redeem them from Sha'ol. If we be in Sha'ol, we'll be redeemed much faster. Reb Chanina says another reason because the language of the Babylonians is similar to Torah. It'll be easier for people to know how to learn. Rabbi Yochanan says he sent us back to where we came from. Avram Avinu originally came from Or Kasdim, which is where Bavel is. It's like a man who gets angry with his wife. He sends her home. He sends her to her mother's house. Says the Gemara on that subject of Alexandria, said there are three who went back to their original source, and they are Klal Yisrael, the money of Mitzrayim, and the writing the letters on the luchos. What's referring to Klal Yisrael, like we just said, the Galus, we went back to where he came from. Avram Avinu was from the same area that the Babylonians inhabited. The wealth of Mitzrayim is when Klal Yisrael took it out of Mitzrayim, but it ended up going back to Mitzrayim when Shishak, King Shishak, the power of Mitzrayim, came back and conquered it from Rechavam. And the luchos, it says, "V'ashabram le'enechem," I broke them in front of your eyes. It means it was something wondrous to see that I broke the luchos, but the letters flew out and went up to Shemayim. They went back to where they came from. It says, Ula, there's another reason that Klal Yisrael were sent to Golas in Bavel, is that they can eat the dates of that region, which are very filling and healthy and supportive. They give energy and they help with digestion, and they can actually help Klal Yisrael learn more. Gemara has an incident in which they helped digestion too much. Gemara says Ula came to Pumpadisa and they gave him a basket of the dates, and he said, "How much does a basket like this cost, or how many of these can I get for a zuz?" And they said 3 baskets for a zuz. He said, "Wow, 3 baskets for a zuz. Food is so cheap here. These honey-producing fruit can sell 3 of these just for a zuz, and yet it's hard to understand why you don't have more time to learn." The verse says that night they gave him too much laxative and he was sick, and he said, "You know what? It's a miracle that if this type of food, which is so unhealthy, is so cheap, that you ever manage to learn at all." They still do manage to learn, and that's it.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.